And he says, and just so you know, I know that ticks you off. I know that's going to make you angry. So here's one more rule. You can't complain about it. You can't rebuke her when she comes and grabs those things. Has anybody ever been told to do something for someone else and you didn't want to do it? Get your hands up in the air. Yeah, there's that person at work that we don't want to serve, the one that doesn't deserve it, right? But we're told to do something for them, and sometimes, I know not you, but some people, you know, when they're doing that work for them, they don't do it with a smile on their face, they pass it over with a, here you go. Right? And Boaz is, basically, anticipating this with these fellas. He says, listen, I don't want you to take those sheaves out and be like, and dump them on the ground, and then so he picks them up, and bark at her or something like that. No, you just let her go. You're her servants. Wow. Quite a day, wouldn't you say? So Ruth gleaned in the field, it says in verse 17, until evening. And then she went and she threshed out the barley. If you don't understand, basically if you go out and collect a lot of grains, you have to separate the grains from the stalk so it can be ground into flour and made into food. And so that was her portion of that process. And it says there that when she was done threshing the barley that she had gathered, it amounted to about an ephah. Everybody knows what an ephah is, right? Sure. It's a standard measurement these days. I'm going to go get an ephah of, I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, an ephah back then was basically 10 to 20 liters, probably closer to 20, according to most estimates that I've read. And 20 liters equaled approximately 10 full days' wages to a working man, harvester in that culture. So just so we're clear, Ruth worked all day, gathered for herself. She was allowed off the chain. She could leave the corner of the field and picking up just the spare grains that had got left over. That's what the Bible allowed. And she had moved into the regular part of the field. She was picking for herself, and then apparently all the other guys picked their weight or their normal day's wage and then like double that, and she got all of that stuff. And at the end, she had 10 full days worth of food for her and Naomi. Good day. She comes home with this. And it says there that she carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. And Ruth also brought and gave her what she had left over from lunchtime. So here comes Ruth through the door, and she's like, I'm home, right? And in the one hand, she's got the big bag of grain, and in the other hand, the to-go box. And this, less than 10, 12 hours after waking up and having nothing. We're going to find out later in this chapter. We're not going to be able to get to it because of time today. But she was invited back the next day. In fact, she was invited back the next day for the next 6 weeks. And she finished out not only the barley harvest, but the wheat harvest. And scholars believe that if she continued to produce at the same rate that she was producing, that she would probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of a half year to a 3/4 year amount of food allotted to her in that 6 weeks' time. So poor, widow, foreigner woman comes to a field just hoping to be able to maybe pick some for a biscuit, and ends up in 6 weeks making what a man earns in a half year to 3/4 of a year's of time. Pretty good day. Would you agree? Now, it comes on the heels of a pretty messy, pretty bad bunch of years. A pretty tired group or a couple of girls there, kind of sauntered into Bethlehem. Ruth has been living with this Naomi lady who is completely washed over with depression. She wakes up having nothing, and she says, let's just go see what God does, and God shows up. Now, here's the deal. I don't know what mess you're in. I don't know what's going on in your life. Doesn't particularly matter. I mean, it does, but it's not a player in this equation I'm about to give you. God will provide. He does that. He takes messes and He makes beautiful things from them. And then when He provides, like I told you earlier, He sometimes goes above and beyond what we expect or need. I mean, He didn't just give Ruth enough for that day. It wasn't just her manna. so that she could eat that day. She got 10 days worth, 6 weeks worth of doing 10 days. I mean, she just had above and beyond grace and blessing from God. I mean, that's the nature of our Lord. And what does it hinge on? It hinges on our grateful attitude, our willingness to be thankful for whatever He gives, our willingness to wait for His provision. Let's talk about that next, and then we'll go home. Ruth comes in, and Naomi, I picture her, in her muumuu, kind of laying on the couch. She hasn't gotten up all day, and I can't prove this biblically, but I think she had, in my mind, she probably had thought that perhaps Ruth was gone. And here's why I say that. Orpah left. Ruth got back in Bethlehem. They settled in. They still didn't have anything. Naomi has no reason to believe that Ruth is coming back. Like Ruth might have just been kind of saying, hey, I'm going to go glean in the fields, and then just headed back to Moab, right? Or perhaps she was thinking, Ruth's going to go out there. I can't protect her. We've got no men to protect us. She's going to be this widow foreigner, and she's going to get taken advantage of. She's going to get beat up. She's going to be sexually assaulted. She's probably not coming back. I'm just going to lay here on the couch until I die. But then in the door comes Ruth. Surprise. But Ruth's not only there, she's there with a big bag of barley. Bigger surprise. And on top of that, the to-go box, Chinese. And Naomi pops up from the couch and she's like, whoa, read it there. It says this, it says, her mother-in-law asked her, where did you glean today? How is this possible? Where did you work? Where did all this come from? Who cares? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. She goes on, and Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working, and she said, the name of the man I worked with today is Boaz. And Ruth goes, yes! Excuse me, Naomi said that. Ruth probably did too. But Naomi's like, no kidding, the Lord bless him, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and to the dead. She added, that man is our close relative. He's one of our kinsmen redeemers. And in that one moment, Naomi's heart changed. She went from being Mara, bitter on the couch, wearing the muumuu, to being sweetness, Naomi again, praising her God for His provision. Because she's got Ruth, she's got the barley, she's got the leftovers, and Ruth is working for one of our kinsmen, and the laws, as I'll explain in later weeks, basically say that now Naomi and Ruth can be redeemed by a family member and brought back into a standing where they can live. What a day! What a blessing! And put those verses back up. Do you see where Naomi said that? She said this. She said, the Lord bless him. She pronounces, remember, she's been thinking that God is against her, and God is, she's just all bitter about God. But now she's calling down God's praises on Boaz and says, bless him. And then she says this kind of grammatically confusing statement. She says, he has not stopped showing his kindness, his hesed, his big love, if you want to call it that. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and to the dead. Now, if we're just reading that sentence real fast, we might think that when she says he has not stopped showing his kindness, that she's referring to Boaz. But don't miss this. She's not referring to Boaz. She's talking about the Lord. And she's saying, God, and you know what it's like? It's like watching a movie, and the whole movie unfolds, and then in the very last scene, the main character finally understands what's been going on around him the whole time. And they show like all the clips of all the parts of the story that you were like, oh, yes, oh, that, oh, yes. And then that last scene, he has this epiphany, and then everything makes sense. Has anybody seen a movie like this? Yeah, Sixth Sense was one of those, but I wasn't going to say I saw that. Anyway. It's kind of what's been happening with Naomi. She's been in this stupor, just kind of walking around with a whole woe is me, pitiful attitude. She's laying on this couch all day, and then Ruth comes in, and she's got all this stuff, and it like clicks. And Naomi realizes, God's been here all the time. He's been directing our paths. He's been guiding our steps. He's known exactly what must be done, and now He's doing it. He has not forgotten the living, you and me, Ruth, and our dead. He's honoring everything that needs to be done, and He's bringing it, and here we are.